The history of Russia was being written in the blood of the Civil War. The Bolsheviks fought the Whites not just on the battlefield, for the Red Terror they launched was waged in backyards and cellars right across the country. While the Tsar and his family were held under arrest in the small Siberian town of Ekaterinburg, the decision was taken to shoot them. It came from the two top Bolshevik leaders in Moscow, Lenin and his close colleague Yakov Sverdlov. As the anti-Bolshevik White Army approached Ekaterinburg, local Bolsheviks ordered the commandant of the Ipatiev house, Yurovsky, to execute the members of the royal family. Several years later, Yurovsky himself explained what happened in chilling detail. He wrote, "I got 12 guns ready and chose who would kill who. At 1:30 in the morning, the lorry arrived to take away the corpses. I went to wake up the detainees. I said that the situation was dangerous in the town and that we were taking them to another place. When they were dressed, I took them down to the cellar. I asked them to stand along the wall. Apparently, they did not know what was going to happen. I said to Nikolai that his relatives at home and abroad were trying to free him, and we had decided to shoot him. He said, 'What?' and turned to his son. At that moment, I shot him. We began to fire at will. When they cried out, we fired even faster. When I had managed, with some difficulty, to stop the shooting, I found that some were still alive. I decided that they had fallen out of fear, or they were faking it. Then we decided to finish them off. We shot the daughters, but nothing happened. Then Commissar Yermakov started to bayonet them. Even that didn't help. We finished them off by shooting them in the head. We checked the bodies and started to carry them away. At this point, I realized why the daughters had lived for so long. It turned out they had jewelry and diamonds sewn into their corsets. They tried to burn the bodies, poured sulfuric acid over them, and threw them into a mine shaft. They spent 2 days trying to dispose of the bodies because officially it was announced that only Nicholas had been executed, while his family had been taken to a safe place. 15 years later, in his memoirs, Trotsky admitted this was a lie. He described a conversation with the Bolshevik leader, Yakov Sverdlov. "Where is the Tsar?" Sverdlov replied, "He was shot, of course." "And his family?" "His family too." "All of them?" "All of them." Almost simultaneously, in the little town of Alapayevsk, 140 kilometers away, Elizabeth, the sister of the Empress, together with 5 other relatives of the Tsar, were taken to the woods with a promise of safety. In Petrograd, 4 more of the Tsar's relatives were executed in the Peter and Paul fortress, near the tombs of his ancestors. Days later, when the white troops occupied Ekaterinburg, they could not find the Tsar's family or even their bodies. However, in the woods near Alapayevsk, they found a terrifying sight. In a mine shaft, they discovered the mutilated remains of 6 of the Tsar's relatives. The investigators realized that the victims had lived for at least 2 days after being thrown into the mine, and that the Grand Duchess Elizabeth, though fatally wounded, had bound up the wounds of the others, until eventually they had all died. But what had happened to the remains of the Tsar's family? Why did the investigators, who stayed in Ekaterinburg for 1.5 years, find only circumstantial evidence to support the rumors that it was not just the Tsar who had died, as the Bolsheviks had said, but his entire family? Only now do we have a clear picture of what happened. On the outskirts of Ekaterinburg, the executioner's lorry had got bogged in a swamp. They took the bodies out, dug a shallow grave in the mud, covered the grave with railway sleepers, then drove the lorry over them to settle them in. Later, the White Army investigator Sokolov even photographed this place, but it didn't occur to him that something could be hidden so simply. Several years later, one of the Tsar's executioners, Yermakov, had a photograph taken of himself standing at this place, but he never explained why. One of the other executioners boasted that the world will never know what we did with them. As a result, even today, there are people who believe that some members of the royal family miraculously escaped.
Я Чернов Валентина Васильевна, являюсь дочерью Ольги Николаевны Романовой.
Скирдова Вера Васильевна, тоже являюсь дочерью Романовой Ольги Николаевны. Как узнали? Да мы так все время, по всяким слухам, нам все время говорят, что ваша мать царская дочка, ваша мать. Ну, мы, конечно, не верили сначала, да и боялись. И я часто мать спрашиваю: мам, правда, что ли, это вот так вот, когда она скажет, ну, как тебе сказать? Она и говорит: правда, неправда, но раз люди говорят, зря не скажут.
There was one rather more plausible claim. On a cold winter's day in 1920, a woman who had tried to commit suicide was brought into the Dahldorf mental hospital in Berlin. She refused to undress or to say who she was. When finally they managed to examine her body, they found the evidence of horrible scars inflicted by bullets and bayonets. For 2 years, she would not say who she was or where she came from. The nurses simply called her Fräulein Unbekannt, the unknown woman. Eventually, rumors began to spread that she was in fact one of the Tsar's daughters. A Russian emigre who visited the hospital recognized her as Tatiana. She neither admitted nor denied this. Suddenly, on the 3rd of August 1921, she announced that she was Anastasia, the Tsar's youngest daughter. And she maintained this claim for the rest of her life. However, she never managed to prove this conclusively. As a result, she lived under the name Anna Anderson until she died in 1984. But so great was the desire to believe that someone had escaped from the massacre in Ekaterinburg that throughout the world an extraordinary legend began to grow around her name in films, songs and books. But was it really possible that these totally defenseless people could have escaped death from the bullets and bayonets of their executioners? The executioners' accounts of the shootings are quite consistent with each other. But there is one curious aspect of their story. All mention shooting 11 people, yet they apparently buried only 9. What happened to the other 2 bodies? From their accounts, we know that when the lorry with the bodies got bogged down in the woods near railway crossing number 184, the 2 commissars and the driver went to seek assistance. The remaining guards were left behind in the dead of night to look after their grim cargo. Yurovsky and Yermakov reported that when they returned, they burned 2 corpses on a bonfire and then buried the remaining 9. Why? Surely it would have been quicker to bury all the bodies, and it could not have been easy to light a fire in the swamp. It is difficult to find a rational explanation for such an odd decision. Is it possible, perhaps, that while the commissars were absent, the guards found that 2 victims were still alive and carried them away? If so, the returning commissars would have noticed the missing bodies and might have claimed to burn them to account for their absence. But this part of the story remains obscure. With each passing year, the chances of finding what really happened seemed to diminish. For 60 years, the forests of the Urals hid their secret. Then a police investigator, Gaily Ryabov, visited the area in 1976.
Мне показали подвал, в котором расстреляли Романовых. И я представил себе, как падали люди, как лилась кровь. И я понял, что коммунистическая идея, в которую я верил, которой я служил и в тот момент продолжал служить, на самом деле ложь, ложь кровавая, ложь грязная. И я подумал, что мое покаяние за содеянное мною, моими родителями, может быть, тысячами и миллионами других людей заключается в том, что нужно найти уничтоженных Романовых и предать их по православному обряду земле,